A country in East Asia that known variously as the Lion City or Garden City, the latter for its many parks and tree-lined streets, has also been called Instant Asia because it offers the tourist an expeditious glimpse into the cultures brought to it by immigrants from all parts of Asia. If you would like to know more about this country, so keep watching till end. Hello. Hope you're doing well. In this video, we are going to talk about Singapore, a country known for being a global financial center, being among the most densely populated places in the world, having a world-class city airport with a waterfall, and a botanic garden that is a World Heritage Site. If you are interested in this kind of content, please subscribe to Farman's Life channel, and by pressing the bell on the side, you will be notified as soon as the next video is released. We are very glad that you are with us in this video. Singapore, officially the Republic of Singapore, is a sovereign island country and city-state in maritime Southeast Asia. It lies about 1 degree of latitude, 137 kilometers, north of the equator, off the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula, bordering the Strait of Malacca to the west, the Singapore Strait to the south, the South China Sea to the east, and the Straits of Johor to the north. The country's territory is composed of one main island, 63 satellite islands and islets, and one outlying islet. The combined area of these has increased by 25% since the country's independence as a result of extensive land reclamation projects. It has the third highest population density in the world. With a multicultural population and recognizing the need to respect cultural identities of the major ethnic groups within the nation, Singapore has 4 official languages: English, Malay, Mandarin, and Tamil. English is the lingua franca and numerous public services are available only in English. Multiracialism is enshrined in the Constitution and continues to shape national policies in education, housing, and politics. Singapore's history dates back at least a millennium, having been a maritime emporium known as Temasek and subsequently as a major constituent part of several successive thalassocratic empires. Its contemporary era began in 1819 when Stamford Raffles established Singapore as an entrepot trading post of the British Empire. In 1867, the colonies in Southeast Asia were reorganized and Singapore came under the direct control of Britain as part of the Straits Settlements. During World War II, Singapore was occupied by Japan in 1942, and returned to British control as a separate crown colony following Japan's surrender in 1945. Singapore gained self-governance in 1959 and in 1963 became part of the new Federation of Malaysia, alongside Malaya, North Borneo, and Sarawak. Ideological differences, most notably the perceived encroachment of the egalitarian Malaysian Malaysia political ideology led by Lee Kuan Yew into the other constituent entities of Malaysia, at the perceived expense of the Bumiputera and the policies of Kechuanan Melayu, eventually led to Singapore's expulsion from the Federation 2 years later. Singapore became an independent sovereign country in 1965. After early years of turbulence whilst lacking natural resources and a hinterland, the nation rapidly developed to become one of the 4 Asian tigers based on international trade and economic globalization, integrating itself within the world economy through free trade with minimal to no trade barriers or tariffs, export-oriented industrialization, and the large accumulation of received foreign direct investments, foreign exchange reserves, and assets held by sovereign wealth funds. A highly developed country, It is tied at 12th on the UN Human Development Index and has the second highest GDP per capita, PPP, in the world. Identified as a tax haven, Singapore is the only country in Asia with a AAA sovereign credit rating from all major rating agencies. It is a major aviation, financial, and maritime shipping hub, and has consistently been ranked as one of the most expensive cities to live in for expatriates and foreign workers. Singapore is placed highly in key social indicators: education, healthcare, quality of life, personal safety, infrastructure, and housing, with a homeownership rate of 88%. Singaporeans enjoy one of the longest life expectancies, fastest internet connection speeds, lowest infant mortality rates, and lowest levels of corruption in the world. Singapore is a unitary parliamentary republic with a Westminster system of unicameral parliamentary government, and its legal system is based on common law. Although the country is a multi-party democracy with free elections, the government under the People's Action Party, PAP, wields significant control and dominance over politics and society. The PAP has governed the country continuously since full internal self-government was achieved in 1959, with 83 out of 104 seats in Parliament as of the 2020 general election. One of the 5 founding members of ASEAN, Singapore is also the headquarters of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation (APEC) Secretariat, the Pacific Economic Cooperation Council (PEC) Secretariat, and is the host city of many international conferences and events. Singapore consists of 63 islands, including the main island, Pulau Ujang. There are 2 man-made connections to Johor, Malaysia: the Johor-Singapore Causeway in the north and the Tuas Second Link in the west. Jurong Island, Pulau Tekong, Pulau Ubin and Sentosa are the largest of Singapore's smaller islands. The highest natural point is Bukit Timah Hill at 163.63 m. Under British rule, Christmas Island and the Cocos Islands were part of Singapore, and both were transferred to Australia in 1957. Pedra Branca is the nation's easternmost point. Singapore Botanic Gardens is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, one of 3 gardens in the world, and the only tropical garden to be recognized as such. Singapore's urbanization means that it has lost 95% of its historical forests, and now over half of the naturally occurring fauna and flora in Singapore is present in nature reserves, such as the Bukit Timah Nature Reserve and the Sungai Buloh Wetland Reserve, which comprise only 0.25% of Singapore's land area. In 1967, to combat this decline in natural space, the government introduced the vision of making Singapore a garden city, aiming to improve quality of life. Since then, nearly 10% of Singapore's land has been set aside for parks and nature reserves. The government has created plans to preserve the country's remaining wildlife. Singapore's well-known gardens include the Singapore Botanic Gardens, a 161-year-old tropical garden and Singapore's first UNESCO World Heritage Site. Singapore has a tropical rainforest climate, Köppen, AF, with no distinctive seasons, uniform temperature and pressure, high humidity, and abundant rainfall. Temperatures usually range from 23 to 32 degrees Celsius. While temperature does not vary greatly throughout the year, there is a wetter monsoon season from November to February. Singapore is the world's 3rd largest foreign exchange center, 6th largest financial center, 2nd largest casino gambling market, 3rd largest oil refining and trading center, largest oil rig producer and hub for ship repair services, and largest logistics hub. The economy is diversified, with its top contributors being financial services, manufacturing, and oil refining. Its main exports are refined petroleum, integrated circuits, and computers. Other significant sectors include electronics, chemicals, mechanical engineering, and biomedical sciences. Singapore was ranked 7th in the Global Innovation Index in 2022. The nation's best-known global companies include Singapore Airlines, Changi Airport, and the Port of Singapore, all of which are among the most awarded in their respective fields. Singapore Airlines was ranked as Asia's most admired company, and the world's 19th most admired company in 2015 by Fortune's annual 50 Most Admired Companies in the World industry surveys. Changi Airport connects over 100 airlines to more than 300 cities. The strategic international air hub has more than 480 World's Best Airport awards as of 2015, and is known as the most awarded airport in the world. Over 10 free trade agreements have been signed with other countries and regions. Singapore is the second largest foreign investor in India. It is the 14th largest exporter and the 15th largest importer in the world. Tourism is a major industry and contributor to the Singaporean economy, attracting 18.5 million international tourists in 2018, more than 3 times Singapore's total population. Singapore is the 5th most visited city in the world, and 2nd in the Asia-Pacific. In 2019, tourism contributed directly to about 4% of Singapore's GDP. The national flower of Singapore is the hybrid orchid, Vanda Miss Joaquim, named in memory of a Singapore-born Armenian woman, who crossbred the flower in her garden at Tanjong Pagar in 1893. Singapore is known as the Lion City, and many national symbols such as the coat of arms and the lion head symbol make use of a lion. Singapore has a highly developed market economy, based historically on extended entrepot trade. Along with Hong Kong, South Korea, and Taiwan, Singapore is one of the 4 Asian tigers, and has surpassed its peers in terms of gross domestic product, GDP, per capita. Between 1965 and 1995, growth rates averaged around 6% per annum, transforming the living standards of the population. The Singaporean economy is regarded as free, innovative, dynamic, and business-friendly. For several years, Singapore has been one of the few countries with an AAA credit rating from the Big Three, and the only Asian country to achieve this rating. Singapore attracts a large amount of foreign investment as a result of its location, skilled workforce, low tax rates, advanced infrastructure, and zero tolerance against corruption. It is the world's most competitive economy in 2019, according to the World Economic Forum's ranking of 141 countries, with the 2nd highest GDP per capita. Roughly 44% of the Singaporean workforce is made up of non-Singaporeans. Despite market freedom, Singapore's government operations have a significant stake in the economy, contributing 22% of the GDP. The city is a popular location for conferences and events. The currency of Singapore is the Singapore dollar, SGD or S-dollar, issued by the Monetary Authority of Singapore, MAS. It has been interchangeable with the Brunei dollar at par value since 1967. MAS manages its monetary policy by allowing the Singapore dollar exchange rate to rise or fall within an undisclosed trading band. This is different from most central banks, which use interest rates to manage policy. Singapore has the world's 11th largest foreign reserves, and one of the highest net international investment position per capita. Singapore has been identified as a tax haven for the wealthy due to its low tax rates on personal income and tax exemptions on foreign-based income and capital gains. Individuals such as Australian millionaire retailer Brett Blundy and multi-billionaire Facebook co-founder Eduardo Saverin are two examples of wealthy individuals who have settled in Singapore. Singapore has the world's highest percentage of millionaires, with 1 out of every 6 households having at least $1 million in disposable wealth. This excludes property, businesses, and luxury goods, which if included would increase the number of millionaires, especially as property in Singapore is among the world's most expensive. Singapore has a low unemployment rate for a developed country, with the rate not exceeding 4% from 2005 to 2014, and reaching highs of 3.1% in 2005 and 3% during the 2009 global financial crisis. It fell to 1.8% in the first quarter of 2015. Singapore does not have a minimum wage, believing that it would lower its competitiveness. It also has one of the highest income inequalities among developed countries. Although recognizing that foreign workers are crucial to the country's economy, the government has considered placing limits on inflows of these workers, as foreign workers make up 80% of the construction industry and up to 50% of the service industry. In the following, we describe the 5 countries that have the most trade relations with Singapore. Number 1. Singapore and China. In 2022, mainland China, Malaysia and the US were Singapore's top trading partners. Singapore's exports to mainland China exceeded Singapore's imports from mainland China, while Singapore's imports from Malaysia and US exceeded exports to these trading partners. Made up 83% of non-oil domestic exports. In 2020, Singapore exported $42.9 billion to China. The main products that Singapore exported to China are integrated circuits, ethylene polymers, and machinery having individual functions. In 2020, China exported $54 billion to Singapore. The main products that China exported to Singapore were integrated circuits, refined petroleum, and broadcasting equipment. Number 2. Singapore and US. US goods and services trade with Singapore totaled an estimated $93.7 billion in 2020. Exports were $51.6 billion, imports were $42.1 billion. The US goods and services trade surplus with Singapore was $9.6 billion in 2020. Singapore is currently our 17th largest goods trading partner with $57.8 billion in total, two-way, goods trade during 2020. Goods exports totaled $26.9 billion, goods imports totaled $30.8 billion. The U.S. goods trade deficit with Singapore was $3.9 billion in 2020. Trade and services with Singapore, exports and imports, totaled an estimated $35.9 billion in 2020. Services exports were $24.7 billion, services imports were $11.2 billion. The U.S. services trade surplus with Singapore was $13.5 billion in 2020. Singapore was the United States' 14th largest goods export market in 2020. U.S. goods exports to Singapore in 2020 were $26.9 billion. U.S. exports to Singapore account for 1.9% of overall U.S. exports in 2020. The top export categories in 2020 were machinery, electrical machinery, aircraft, optical and medical instruments, and mineral fuels. U.S. total exports of agricultural products to Singapore totaled $1.1 billion in 2020, our 25th largest agricultural export market. Leading domestic export categories include animal fats, vegetable oils, dairy products, food preparations, and essential oils. Singapore was the United States' 17th largest supplier of goods imports in 2020. U.S. goods imports from Singapore totaled $30.8 billion in 2020. U.S. imports from Singapore account for 1.3% of overall U.S. imports in 2020. The top import categories in 2020 were precious metal and stone, gold, pharmaceuticals, machinery, optical and medical instruments, and miscellaneous food, preparations for beverage manufacture. U.S. total imports of agricultural products from Singapore totaled $3.3 billion in 2020, our ninth largest supplier of agricultural imports. Leading categories include sugars, sweeteners, beverages bases, other feeds and grain products, vegetable oils, baked goods, cereals, and pasta, and essential oils. Number 3. Singapore and Malaysia. Malaysia and Singapore has close bilateral ties due to its close geographical proximity and accessibility between the countries. It is Singapore's second largest trading partner, with Singapore always being in the top 3 sources of foreign direct investments, FDIs, into Malaysia. In 2020, Malaysia exported $36.5 billion to Singapore. The main products that Malaysia exported to Singapore are integrated circuits, refined petroleum, and office machine parts. In 2020, Singapore exported $22.9 billion to Malaysia. The main products that Singapore exported to Malaysia were integrated circuits, refined petroleum, and gold. Number 4. Singapore and Indonesia. Indonesia-Singapore trade volume reaches 36 billion Singapore dollars, $29.32 billion US dollars. Singapore is Indonesia's top foreign investor, with a cumulative total of $1.14 billion US dollars in 142 projects. In 2020, Indonesia exported $12.6 billion to Singapore. The main products that Indonesia exported to Singapore are gold, petroleum gas, and refined petroleum. In 2020, Singapore exported $14.8 billion to Indonesia. The main products that Singapore exported to Indonesia were refined petroleum, gold, and integrated circuits. Number 5. Singapore and Japan. The two countries benefit from heavy mutual trade, formally established through the 2002 Japan-Singapore Economic Partnership Agreement, (CEPA), which was Japan's first ever economic partnership agreement with another country. In 2020, Japan exported $15.8 billion to Singapore. The main products that Japan exported to Singapore are gold, integrated circuits, and passenger and cargo ships. In 2020, Singapore exported $11 billion to Japan. The main products that Singapore exported to Japan were packaged medicaments, gas turbines, and integrated circuits. Singapore, known variously as the Lion City or Garden City, the latter for its many parks and tree-lined streets, has also been called Instant Asia because it offers the tourist an expeditious glimpse into the cultures brought to it by immigrants from all parts of Asia. Singapore is the destination of many tourists. If you have a memory of traveling to Singapore or living there, leave us a comment. Please support Farman's Life channel with your likes so that we have more enthusiasm to post more content. You can also comment your questions to us. If you like to watch and know more about this content, please subscribe to the channel, and by pressing the bell on the side, you will be notified as soon as a new video is released. Thank you for being with us.